We met on the fifth and the last 14th season of the Polish Cinema for Beginners, entitled How to Be a Woman, for a short lesson on history of Polish female cinema. And our guest is Anna Lalka. Hello.
Hello.
Journalist associated with Radio Luz and film blog Watching Closely. In her work, she focuses on culture and music connected with feminism and social topics. Also, you can find her on her lifestyle podcast, Jak ta Lala, and her own activist Instagram account where she presents feminist matters. And on the beginning, I would like to arise a question: what is the female cinema? It's kind of difficult because in Polish we have this definition distinction, which is not really in English so much as in Polish, but the very term female cinema is quite problematic because it's descript and suggests the type of cinema, like some
romantic comedy.
Yeah, or the films that
Families
shows woman in the subject of the film, like she's a heroine, or the film is likable by the woman and it's two women, but it's not really mean that it's made by the woman. So we have this two distinction in Polish language. So it's kind of problematic what mean to discuss what is being woman in cinema as a subject of the films, or as an artist or director which just doing the films, not really matter if it's feminist or just doing her job as a director. So
I think both of the cases are interesting, because in one case we are talking about the representation of different kind of women on Polish screens, and the second case is talking about what is the role of women in Polish cinema, and are they in these directorial seats, or are they in editing rooms? Do they write the scripts, etc., etc.?
Yeah, I think it's the topic of this discussion. Are women supposed to focus on women's cinema? Once I was talking with Sasha Polak on Festival New Horizons. She's from Netherlands, and she told me that she doesn't want to tell women's stories, but human stories, right? So I think that's the topic of today's discussion, that women are not supposed to focus on women's subjects, because that's silly, I guess.
But also you choose the film Fuga as a main movie of the discussion, and it's kind of combining both of themes. Like, this is the woman director, but also the story is a woman's perspective. So it's also really important to see how the woman sees this as a film character. So it's kind of, you kind of choose the combine of the two subjects.
Actually, Fugue is the interesting example for this subject, because we have strong female heroine played by Gabriela Muskała, but Gabriela Muskała is also a scriptwriter for the movie, and the director is female. So we have a lot of strong female characters in those main roles, also both on the screen and behind the scenes. Yeah.
Yeah, as Gabriela Muskała
Surprise!
said, yeah, it's me. As Gabriela Muskała said before the premiere of the Fugue, I had to wrote my own part to be a part of this movie. So it's probably something telling us about women in Polish cinema.
And kind of a view of the like, if you write the script from the woman perspective, so you can just do it being a woman, probably.
Yeah, I think it's easier because we can, of course, talk about feminism and about that we want to differ and the equality of subjects. But I think it's easier to just think about what we think as women, right? Because we were raised in a society which was binary, I think, still. So I think it's easier for Gabriela Muskała, for example, to create a story about women in her 30s, like in the movie, which is a symbolic thing, I think, in Fug, because from the beginning we don't know if it's a movie about feminist emancipation, but after that it's quite interesting. It's quite interesting also that because Agnieszka Smoczyńska created a short movie, I guess, in 2007 about with Gabriela Muskała, Aria Diva, and it was connected with living in marriage. And I think these problems were really problematic in 2007. 2020, I don't know if every woman thinks about marriage now, right? So I have a problem with that because I think it can live in past. I mean, this topic.
But Smoczyńska also changing her views in her movies as she gave us the lure. The name is
The Lure, yeah.
The Lure. So it's like a kind of music, pop culture, punk, horror story. But the main characters are girls, but they also transformed in this kind of mermaids with thieves and anger inside them. So it's kind of symbolic, but also meaningful as a viewing of the woman in the men's world in the 90s, because it's also the time when she's showing that the convention between the tension between gender was so much bigger.
But I also think that what is interesting in both the films, in The Lure and Fugue, though they are very far apart as far as the tools of storytelling and the story itself, both of the images of women in those movies might be threatening to patriarchal, let's say. Like, both of them in very different ways are not what conservative, usually male viewer would expect of a female protagonist in the movie.
Yeah, The Lure was quite sexual and kind of putting the woman in a patriarchy, like with body and with her view. And I think Fugue is more silent, I guess, and maybe more focused on this society living with men, but emotionally, and this is also problematic. I think I'd choose Fugue more like from emancipation about women, because it's focused on the living, not maybe so. I mean, The Lure is unreal, right? So it's hard to focus on today's problem. So I guess it's quite interesting in Fugue showing these topics.
We can go back to the video essay which you always made for to the point of the subject, and it's a focus on the history of women in Polish cinema. So it's the story is long, but it's not full of female characters in the Polish history of cinema.
No, if you watch the video essay, I think it lists kind of the highlights of the cinema history in Poland as far as her story goes. So we don't have much to talk about, though nothing, because there are some very prominent even female director, though direction was considered for a long time to be like a boys club. But we also, we mentioned it's outside of the air before we started this conversation, that it's also this distinction that you mentioned at the beginning of our discussion is very prominent in Polish cinema, that we do have, though not many, female directors, and they usually don't focus too much on representation of women, or they just want to be telling the stories, and we can only guess if that was in history, if that was because they wanted to fit in with other directors which were usually male, or they were just liberated, and they because it's also not everybody is born activist, not everybody is born feminist. The fact that you are born female and wants to be a director doesn't mean that you want to be a feminist cinema
but also maybe
creator.
If you choose the feminist way, then you already a feminist director, not just the director. You already have this distinction, which makes you close for other movements. Like you need to then stick to your label, and it's difficult to just use the label if you're still fighting for just be in the business.
I guess it's quite feminist actually to create stories like men, just to focus on creating movies, not creating movies about women. Like Catherine Bigelow, first Oscar,
exactly.
she created a movie about the war. And for example, Agnieszka Holland, she was focused on communism and the topics that were really important and actually activist, but maybe not women's activist, right? So, but she created a personality which led her to be a queen of 70s like cinema director women. So I guess not every time you have to focus on just talking about being a woman. I think it's the main thing in it.
I have even a quote from Agnieszka Holland. I used to be a Joanna d'Arc. I was struggling against communists, against censorship, against various limitation. Now I can disarm. Also because I have more confidence, but the anger and the temper remains with me. So she shows that there was so much fight that maybe just using the feminist fight, it was not enough in the subject of always being prepared for a fight.
We took Fugue by Agnieszka Smoczyńska as an inspiration for this discussion and for the video essay that you can see on our Facebook and our YouTube. And we talked a bit about the plot of the movie there, but what is interesting to point out is the fact that it's the like very original story of emancipation, and it is told by a lot of female. There is a female director, the female script writer, female actress in the main role. So it is women's cinema as well as female cinema. I would, yeah, that was a statement, not a question. So yeah.
Good one.
Similar to this, we could point out that, for example, Wieża Jasny Dzień, Tower A Bright Day, is a similar example of a movie that is mainly produced by a female team. But there is a lot of cases in recent Polish cinema where we have strong female protagonists, and the list could go on. There is a Rose by Wojciech Smarzowski, Reverse by Borys Lankosz. There is also Ida that we forgot to mention 2 weeks ago, talking about Polish Church on Polish screens by Paweł Pawlikowski. And all of those titles are linked by the fact that there is not a lot of women behind the scenes, that those films are directed by men and written by men. So coming back to one of the things that we talked about before the break, is there like I don't want to phrase it badly, but what is the difference? What one of you thinks is the difference between portrayal of women written by men or written by women? Can you really see it in Polish cinema? Is the protagonist in Fugue so much? Is it better representation than, for example, the Rose in Wojciech Smarzowski's movies?
I wouldn't like to compare movies just because they were created by men and women. I mean, of course, it's a whole different story. I mean, Ida or Zimna Wojna, the women were more fragile, I mean, softer kind of. But Gabriela Muskała created a portrait of women who was really fierce. And I don't really like it. I mean, she's really, really fierce. And I mean, in Agnieszka Smoczyńska movies, women are over fierce, I think, because she wants a statement about how women can be. And of course, it's maybe good because women were softer in the 60s or 70s movie, but I think it's too much for me. For example, Szumowska also creates women which are really sexual and strong, and I don't think it's a good lead for emancipation of women. So I don't think it's better. I think it's different. but I don't think it's better way to show women in cinema or something.
But this is interesting in the case of Wieża Jasny Dzień, Tower Bright Day. Yeah, there is even an English title.
Yeah.
Okay.
We've shown it at Polish Cinema for Beginners last season. I think.
So, and The Lure, there are two different stories about women and kind of telling the story of emancipation, but with the idea of telling this differently. This is not like just putting the story of transformation. This is a really symbolic, sometimes just a play with the genre, like in The Lure, but also in the Tower Bright Day, there is this witch contest, which make this mysterious and weird, but this is also a story about two sisters which need to, I don't know, fight with each other and become the sister again and find the language between them, which just gone somewhere. The tension between the sister, this is the really interesting thing to show it, not just like put it there, just write it that this is how it is. This is just like playing with the theme. So probably the women don't need to explain themselves and don't need to
they don't need to shout and scream and all that.
They can just tell the stories which are not just put there. There can be just a play with the script and can imagine things in a kind of a different context. And if you take Smarzowski, this is like a really human stories. This is like really weird, real and heavy, and this is like tense drama, like all the Smarzowski films. But also, you know, there is always this context of being a victim or being a fighter, of being in a problematic scene, which you need to find your humanity. And in this new wave, you just tell the different kind of a story, and you don't need to defend anyone. And just, I think this is the freedom of a new films and speech, that there is no distinction between the woman and men. You can just tell the story as you see it.
I think it's good to go back to, for example, Joanna Kos-Krauze and Krzysztof Krauze movies, because they created movies together and they were kind of he told that she co-created movies, and she started co-directing these movies because she was like half part of this, and she created many stories. And I think a dialogue between men and women is really visible in this. For example, in Plac Zbawiciela, it's nice to see the characters and the script created for men and women, not just, you know, shouting some of it. And for example, Papusza, created also by Joanna Kos-Krauze, was telling a story of women, maybe going back to some part of history which was not really represented by women. And that's also really fascinating. For example, Maria Sadowska also went back to Sztuka Kochania, the art of love. I don't know if it's translation, about Michalina Wisłocka and about sexuality of women, which was also forgotten. So I think this is a subtle way and a good way to maybe recreate stories of women, which was maybe quite forgotten these days. So I like this type of, and I think Maria Sadowska actually is a quite feminist director in Polish cinema.
I think that in perfect context, I think there shouldn't be a need for a female director to represent a female problem, because she's an original creator, so she can tell us a story of anything and anything that she wants. But I think that the need is sometimes like there is a problem and you have to answer it, and the answer is from time to time becoming activist and becoming the voice of that problem. So that's why we sometimes expect, and even in this conversation, that's why I asked this question a few minutes ago, is the representation created by men and women different? Because we sometimes expect that women will tell about this subject, and I think in the perfect world they wouldn't have to, but but sometimes just the
They need to.
sometimes they just
Maybe
needs to.
we expect from the female directors that they give us a female heroine as a main character. Not even the feminist subjects behind her, but we are used to have men as main characters in the movies. So this is not just a Polish cinema. We just look at all the American cinema, European cinema. We just have a man in a main role, and this is the new change, that there is more female characters in the point of the movie, and it's not even about the woman behind the camera. It's all the process that everybody should just put the woman more visible and not just give them this really sometimes offensive role behind the man, just helping him out. So maybe this is like I expect sometimes from the female director that there should be maybe more women to be on a screen that we used to.
I think that Polish cinema, talking about author cinema, like maybe not so mainstream, are quite good represented. I mean, also characters. I can't really tell bad things about Polish cinema talking about that. But maybe mainstream movies I would like to be less patriarchally. So that's the problem, I guess. Like these blockbuster movies. These movies are quite offensive for women, I think. Patrick Vegan, all of that. But talking about movies that we talk today, I don't think men create bad things about women. So I don't think Polish cinema is something to talk badly about that.